Here's the thing, action sequences in movies are not real. You know it, I know it, everyone else knows it. Captain America didn't really hold on to a helicopter stopping it from taking off. But because of the way it's shot, acted, edited and comped, you buy into it. Suspension of disbelief is what it's called. In today's video, instead of focusing on all the aspects of filmmaking that come together to create a believable action sequence, today we'll be focusing on the smallest, most basic building block of an action sequence. The punch. In theory, it's simple. You make a fist, and with the combined power of your arm, your shoulder and your back, you propel your fist until it hits the target, transferring all of that momentum, resulting in the punch receiving party taking damage or getting knocked out. So how do you take this simple concept and you apply it to film so that the person watching it believes every frame of it? To explain it further, I need to take the help of Sir Isaac Newton, specifically his second law of motion, which states, force is the product of mass and acceleration. In other words, F equals m times a. So the force that an object can generate is directly proportional to the mass of the object and its acceleration. Before I bore you guys of this video, let me tell you something. I was and have been a fan of pro wrestling, especially WWE. Back in 2017, they had their Survivor Series pay-per-view. And one of the matches in the card was Brock Lesnar versus AJ Styles. I can safely assume that most of you guys already know who Brock Lesnar is. For those of you who don't, he was the NJCAA and NCAA champion. He became a pro wrestler, joined WWE, left WWE, went to UFC and became the heavyweight champion there. Then he left UFC and came back to WWE. So it's safe to say that Brock Lesnar is a legit tough guy. AJ Styles, on the other hand, in my opinion, is one of, if not the best pro wrestler in the world. So when these two guys went head to head, I was really excited. However, we all know that UFC is completely different than the WWE. On one hand, we have a legitimate mixed martial arts based promotion. On the other, a scripted weekly television show. And truth be told, if these two guys went against each other in the realm of the UFC, there's a high possibility that you'll put your money on the bigger guy. And there's a reason behind it. The bigger guy usually has the higher body mass. And in the case of Brock Lesnar, he weighs around 280 pounds. Using some rough calculations, we can figure out that the mass of his arm is about 9.6 kilograms. Taking a conservative 80 meters per second square as the acceleration, we find that the force generated by Brock is 768 newtons. Similarly, AJ Styles with his 200-pound weight has approximately 6.9 kilograms of arm mass. Keeping the acceleration same at 80 meters per second square, we find that the force AJ can generate with his punch is 552 newton. So clearly Brock has an advantage. But here's the thing, when we enter the realm of fiction, a film or a scripted show like the WWE, if presented correctly, the audience will always root for the underdog, the smaller guy, going against the beast. Think of Rocky or Ripley or in this case AJ Styles. So how do you make the fight believable? Going back to the figure we worked out earlier, for AJ Styles to generate the same amount of force as Brock, he will have to accelerate his arm at 112 meters per second square instead of the assumed 80. In short, he'll have to move faster than his opponent. Before we get into the match itself, I have to mention one last thing. Brock Lesnar has been a dominant champion for almost a year at this point, squashing one opponent after another, and none of his matches have lasted more than 5 minutes. That being said, let's jump into the match itself. From the very beginning, Brock goes hard at AJ, giving him a brutal beatdown. Stiff punches, kicks, suplexes. The loud and energetic crowd who were cheering for AJ have gone quiet. They feared that this is going to be just another one of those one-sided squash matches. Brock continues to manhandle AJ and throws him outside the ring. This is where things start to get interesting. As I mentioned previously, most of Brock's matches up to this point have been a short 5-minute affair. But this match in particular has already crossed the 5-minute mark. As AJ lays outside trying to collect himself, Brock looks suspiciously out of breath. He looks exhausted. Could it be that to prove his dominance, he has overpushed himself? And maybe by throwing AJ outside instead of finishing him off and pinning him, he has given AJ just the breather that he needed. Let's find out. Brock pushes AJ inside and things progress as they did earlier. And again, instead of just getting it over with, Brock is just showing off. playing with his prey like a cat. He runs at full speed and knees AJ on the jaw. Brock seems content with his public display of brutality. He picks up AJ to finish him off. But AJ, being the clever athlete that he is, he gets out of his grip and plants himself on the other side of the ring. As we've already seen what Brock can do from a distance, we have prepared ourselves for another devastating knee to the jaw. But AJ dodges the attack. Brock's knee hits the turnbuckle. AJ baited Lesnar, and being the prideful beast that he is, the bait is taken. Finally, the momentum has shifted. The crowd is going wild. AJ strikes the other knee and plants Brock with a DDT. Weakening his legs is an effective twofold strategy. Being the heavier guy, Brock has a lot more pressure on his legs, and since his finisher involves picking people up on his shoulder and dropping them, losing the strength in his legs hinders his ability to do so. After receiving a brutal assault from the beginning, AJ finally has the upper hand. He keeps working the legs. Brock is stunned. He has no answer to the speed of AJ Styles. He tries to take the aerial route, but Brock suplexes him again. But as it appears right now, it's Brock who's in greater pain than AJ. Brock falling outside is a great reversal of what happened previously. AJ finally has the control of the match. He uses his intelligence and his ring awareness to keep finding ways to damage the knee even further. And just to tie a neat little reversal bow on the present situation, it's AJ who rolls Brock back inside the ring, the opposite of what happened previously. AJ does a beautiful 450 splash. Remember our friend Newton we talked about previously? AJ can't match the force of his opponent, so apart from using his superior intelligence, he's using the entire mass of his body to inflict as much damage as he possibly can. But this is an underdog story. A babyface underdog going against the insurmountable heel. There's no way AJ can win this easily. Brock kicks out. AJ tries to finish Brock off, but Brock fights back, only for his move to be reversed into a calf crusher. A leg lock. Remember that injured knee? AJ is putting pressure on it in an attempt to tap Brock out. This is what I like about pro wrestling. Incredibly talented individuals telling a story using their physicality. In this case, the story is pretty simple. A smaller guy trying to defeat the bigger guy by draining him of his energy. The crowd is going wild. They believe that their hero can slay the monster that is Brock Lesnar. But alas, Brock finds a way to fight back and set himself free. Now we get back to Newton's second law of motion. As I mentioned previously, for AJ to generate the same or greater force, he has to move at a greater pace. So how does he do it? Let me introduce to you the phenomenal forearm. AJ Styles catapults himself off the top rope, flying towards his opponent and smashes his forearm on their face. Instead of the 552 newtons of force that he would generate with a regular punch, since he's accelerating his entire body mass, even if he reduced the acceleration from 80 meters per second squared to 10, AJ is effectively generating 2000 newtons of force. Look at Paul Heyman's face. He's absolutely shocked. AJ covers Brock, but right before the 3 count, Brock kicks out. AJ is devastated. He can't believe what just happened. This is the moment where AJ Styles loses his composure. He lets his frustration take over, going for another phenomenal forearm, misses and loses the match to Brock Lesnar. The underdog has lost. But look at Brock's face. AJ has pushed him to his limits. He is still in pain and is limping his way back to the locker room. By persevering and using his intelligence, AJ Styles makes the audience believe that he has a fighting chance. And as Brock turns around, through the visible pain on his face, we can see a sense of realization. Brock may have won the match, but AJ won the crowd. A story similar to 1976's Rocky. At the same time, with the aforementioned loss of composure on AJ's part, we leave open a possibility for a rematch where Rocky eventually wins. A perfect way to close an underdog story. So let's take what we learned from the match and find examples from films that implement these small things. Right off the bat, the best example that I can think of is Black Widow. Similar to AJ, she has a smaller stature when compared to the enemies she goes against. However, we never question her abilities because it's presented to us in such a way that we believe her actions. As mentioned previously, she too has lower body mass. So to generate enough force, she has to move quicker, and it's exactly what she does. Her speed combined with tactical approach to combat enables her to take down bigger and badder opponents. Each of her strikes are calculated and are meant to take out foes as fast as possible. So instead of going for a drawn-out hand-to-hand exchange, she straight up goes for the knockout, using devices that stun and putting the entire mass of her body behind every punch and kick. And when it comes to even bigger opponents, she climbs on top of them, restricting their vision and choking them out. In fact, the only time she takes damage is when she stays still, gets caught, or is pinned down. And because she's a human being going against gods, monsters, and robots, she's almost always the underdog. Contrast that to something like Charlie's Angels. The reason the action seems so fake is not because of the fight choreography. It's because they threw basic physics out of the window. These characters don't work around their lower body mass, instead they just kick and punch and that's it. And because we cannot completely suspend our disbelief, we end up not caring, which in turn results in the movie failing at the box office. Every action movie doesn't have to be an underdog story. Look at John Wick. That is not an underdog story. But if elements of it are used, it can genuinely elevate an action sequence. For example, the villain needs to pose a viable threat to the hero. There has to be real stakes and real consequences for failure. And the easiest way to do this is to create a villain who's stronger than the hero, mentally, physically, or both. In case you haven't figured it out by now, I'm a huge Black Widow mark. I'm still salty that it took them so long to give her a solo movie. And speaking of the MCU, I have something special in mind. Get subscribed if you want to see that. That being said, thank you very much for sticking around to the very end. It does mean a lot. And if you like the video, like it. If you dislike the video, like it. And I'll see you guys in the next one.